area will give Russia weapons.
The U.S. believes what Russia is likely after is ammunition and shells, which it's running low on after more than 18 months of war in Ukraine.
On March 19, 2025, Ukraine carried out a precision strike with its US-supplied HIMARS system against a Russian staging area in Kursk. The target was significant: a base housing newly arrived North Korean troops, deployed after Kim Jong-un's order to provide direct military support to Russia. The operation unfolded in less than 2 minutes, but resulted in the destruction of a full artillery battery before the guns could fire a single shell. At exactly 4:19 a.m., Ukrainian forces deployed a Laika 100 reconnaissance drone group from a forward base near Sumy. Their mission was simple but critical: locate, confirm, and maintain lock on the North Korean artillery formation in the Kursk forest. What they identified was a freshly established position, less than 72 hours old. Over 3,000 North Korean troops had crossed the Russian border via the Veluiki Railway earlier that week, joining Russian units stationed in Kursk. Their arrival raised the total North Korean presence in Russia to over 15,000 soldiers, making it one of the largest foreign troop deployments in the conflict. Among the reinforcements were at least 12 Koksan M1978 artillery guns. These are 170mm self-propelled heavy artillery pieces developed in North Korea in the late 1970s, designed primarily for long-range bombardment. Each gun has a maximum effective range of more than 60 kilometers using rocket-assisted projectiles. In Korean People's Army doctrine, the Koksan's role has historically been to target rear area bases, logistical hubs, and troop concentrations far beyond the front line. Deployed in Ukraine, the Russian military intended to use them against Ukrainian hubs in Sumy and Poltava, both vital for resupply and troop movements. 3 of the guns were moved into the Kursk forest and set up in a skewed triangular formation. This dispersal was intended to prevent a single strike from eliminating the battery in its entirety. The crews took immediate steps to harden their positions. Camouflage nets were strung between treetops, anti-drone mesh was placed overhead, and fragmentation shields were arranged to reduce vulnerability. The position was meant to resemble a fortified artillery pocket hidden beneath the forest canopy. But the defensive preparations had critical gaps. The site lacked radar coverage. No short-range air defense assets, such as Panzer or Tor systems, were present. This meant that if Ukrainian reconnaissance identified the position, it would be highly vulnerable to precision fire. At 4:22 a.m., Ukrainian reconnaissance confirmed visual contact. 3 Koksan guns in a clearing, barrels oriented southwest. About 15 artillerymen were visible conducting reload operations. They were unaware that their position had already been marked for destruction. Encrypted data was relayed to Ukrainian Artillery Command. Officers immediately assessed the imagery. The analysis was clear: exposed artillery, static structures, no radar, and no layered air defense. Suicide drones were ruled out due to the risk of being entangled in the anti-drone mesh. Instead, the M30A1 GMLRS rocket was selected for the strike. This munition, carried by the M142 HIMARS, is specifically designed to neutralize camouflaged but exposed targets. The M142 HIMARS, short for High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, is the backbone of Ukraine's long-range strike capability. Externally resembling a standard tactical truck, it conceals a highly sophisticated launcher capable of firing 6 precision-guided rockets. The M30A1 variant carries an alternative warhead filled with 182,000 preformed tungsten steel fragments. When detonated mid-air, these fragments disperse at hypersonic speed, saturating an area over 100 meters wide. The effect is devastating against both personnel and unarmored equipment. Each rocket has a maximum range of 84 kilometers, with a circular error probable of less than 3 meters. This level of accuracy is achieved through the encrypted U.S. military M-code GPS guidance, updated continuously by satellites and UAVs. In practice, this means that HIMARS can hit concealed, camouflaged, or even moving targets with near certainty. Equally important is the system's survivability. Powered by a 290 horsepower diesel engine, the M142 has a top speed exceeding 85 kilometers per hour. After firing, it can relocate in under 2 minutes, making counter-battery strikes nearly impossible. Russia has repeatedly attempted to track and destroy HIMARS launchers with loitering munitions and artillery, but Ukraine's rapid shoot-and-scoot doctrine has rendered these efforts largely ineffective. On March 19th, Ukraine applied this doctrine with precision. At 4:25 a.m., an M142 HIMARS launcher assigned to the 27th Artillery Brigade was activated from cold standby. The fire control team, concealed in the Sumy forest, initiated launch protocols. The order was transmitted via a frequency-hopping UHF channel to evade Russian electronic warfare. The launcher pod rotated to a bearing of 68.3 degrees northeast, with an elevation angle of 53 degrees for a high arc trajectory. Weather conditions were favorable. Winds from the southeast measured 4 meters per second, with a temperature of 2 degrees Celsius, ideal for stable rocket flight. The Leica drone maintained lock on the artillery, transmitting updated targeting data every 2 seconds. At exactly 4:26:15 a.m., the first rocket launched. Within 3 seconds, it reached a velocity of 2,700 kilometers per hour at an altitude of 11,000 meters. Following a quasi-ballistic flight path, the rocket rose steeply before descending almost vertically. This reduced the window for interception and increased impact accuracy. The guiding UAV continued to feed updates. The drone was a small tactical system with a radar cross-section of just 0.05 square meters, equivalent to a large bird. Russian early warning radars, such as the Podlet K1 and 35Z6M, were unable to distinguish it from environmental noise. Yet this unassuming drone carried the full targeting solution for a long-range strike. 18 seconds after launch, the rocket reached its apex altitude of 21,400 meters before beginning its terminal dive at speeds exceeding 2,500 kilometers per hour. At 4:26:50 a.m., the warhead detonated directly above the central artillery complex. The effect was immediate. Tungsten fragments rained down across a 100-meter radius. The first impact struck an ammunition truck, triggering a secondary explosion that rose more than 10 meters into the air. One of the Koksan guns was shredded, its chassis twisted and barrel torn apart. All 7 crew members were killed instantly. At 4:27:07 a.m., the second rocket impacted the western battery. Although it detonated 3 meters off-center, the fragmentation pattern was sufficient to saturate the position. One fragment pierced the ammunition loader, while another destroyed the gun's optical sight. The fire control system was obliterated, and the rear track thrown from its axle. 2 crew members outside repositioning the barrel were caught in the blast. One was killed instantly, the other crawled into a trench and disappeared into the smoke. His fate remains unknown. At 4:27:50 a.m., the third rocket struck the resupply truck supporting the final gun. The explosion snapped the axle and tipped the artillery piece on its side. Its breech was torn open and the elevation system destroyed. 5 soldiers on rotation were killed outright. One attempted to escape into the woods, but was struck in the leg by shrapnel and collapsed. The entire strike lasted just over 90 seconds. 3 Koksan guns and their support trucks were eliminated. Over a dozen crew members were killed and the battery rendered permanently inoperable. For Ukraine, the cost was 3 rockets, less than $500,000 in munitions. For Russia and North Korea, the losses exceeded $10 million in equipment, not counting trained personnel. Russian command posts west of Kursk initially believed the sudden silence from the artillery unit was a technical fault. Within minutes, Ukrainian UAVs transmitted live imagery confirming complete destruction. Russia dispatched Orlan-10 drones and a rapid response team, but by the time they arrived, the HIMARS launcher had already relocated and the reconnaissance drones had climbed beyond detection range. This was the third instance in less than 2 weeks where newly arrived North Korean Koksan artillery had been destroyed before it could be effectively deployed. As a result, Russian command suspended forward deployment of long-range North Korean artillery in the Kursk sector. The survivability of these units could no longer be guaranteed. The wider implications were clear. By early 2025, Russia's war effort had entered its third year with mounting losses. In an attempt to stabilize the front, Moscow signed military agreements with Pyongyang, bringing in over 15,000 North Korean artillery personnel and heavy weapons. Historically, North Korea has relied on massed artillery as a strategic equalizer, and its Koksan systems are symbols of that doctrine. Their presence in Russia was meant to boost long-range firepower. However, the vulnerability of these systems when deployed without adequate protection undermines their effectiveness. Unlike in the Korean Peninsula, where North Korea positions artillery in hardened mountain bunkers, these units in Kursk were exposed in forest clearings. Without layered air defense or electronic warfare support, they became easy targets for Ukraine's precision strike capability. Ukraine's systematic targeting of these artillery pieces represents more than just tactical strikes. It demonstrates the ability to neutralize new reinforcements before they can alter the battlefield. For North Korean troops, the psychological impact is significant. Units trained to rely on artillery dominance are instead destroyed within days of deployment. The Kursk strike on March 19th was a case study in modern precision warfare. Using real-time UAV surveillance, encrypted communications, and GPS-guided munitions, Ukraine eliminated a high-value target in under 2 minutes. The operation highlighted both the effectiveness of HIMARS and the limitations of deploying legacy systems like the Koksan without comprehensive protection. For Russia and North Korea, the question now is whether the deployment of 15,000 troops can meaningfully change the balance of the war, or whether they will simply become the next entries in Ukraine's growing list of precision strike operations.